in the game a bit? Yeah, have a look.
I'm not saying anything to you in particular because I know you're not too accurate with your reporting.
That's what you paid
so you're
for.
Saying I should resign. So you're saying I should resign?
I think
that's
you should,
your opinion. Is that right?
That's my
opinion.
Fine. Are you going to resign then?
No, of course I'm not going to resign.
I simplify things next time.
Buenos noches, people of the world, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to tonight's edition of the National Curriculum. Coming to you live from Sydney. I am Nick Stoll. Joining me in Melbourne is Joey Lynch and Taryn. How are you guys?
Going very well, thanks, Nick. How are you?
Oh, the enthusiasm is coming in hot. Wow. All the energy in the world there from Joey. But look, if you got more energy, let us know in the comments. Already run them memes that said late, even after a late start. Very subdued first 4 minutes of the pod. Yes, we had to start late because, as you may see, there are availability issues. And I believe Joey isn't even quite available right at this moment. Joey, is that correct?
Yeah, listen, I'm sort of also filing on the A-League women's game that just finished, my updated
what was the
score? Press conference. It was 2-2, Adelaide United versus Melbourne Victory. Did you not see Catherine Zimmerman's bomb?
Didn't watch it at all.
It was almost as good as Irankunda's, maybe, on the same par.
There you go. There's your match report. File, send, done, no problem.
Yeah, I'm sure AAP will pay me for that.
Anyway, good luck to everyone. Look, everyone who's where can they read that match report, Joey?
Well, any outlet that has the good sense to subscribe to the Australian Associated Press, the veritable pillar of Australian journalism that it is, really doing the hard yards that nobody else was. Although I think Keep Up subscribe. So let's just say Keep Up.
All right. Well, there you go. You can check it out at Keep Up. But what we will start the show with is, of course, that Irankunda goal that you mentioned. What a goal it was. Beautiful strike. Kind of almost, I think Andy Harper in the commentary said it was Cristiano Ronaldo-esque. But the thing with that was Cristiano Ronaldo would have either hit it into another player or smoked it over the bar. So we're going to call it Irankunda-esque because that was amazing. Joey, you were in the stadium. How was it one of those goals where even like the Victory fans were like, oh, we just saw something special?
No, the Victory fans were pretty pissed because that's what it was remarkable about the game. I'm not sure if you'd arrived at that point for that, Taryn, but it was like it started out with the good vibes, obviously the Pride Cup, which we'll get into in a little bit with Taryn, but like by the end of the game... Was
there an actual cup, by the way?
There was for the men's and women's, but we don't know who gets it because both games ended in a draw.
So I guess it jackpots to next year.
Yeah, it jackpots
double the cups.
Year. But what was remarkable about the game, like you saw it's
plenty of cups at Mardi Gras last night. I don't know what was in those cups, but anyway, someone else.
But like you saw it in the clash with Fornaroli and Popovic. A bit of feeling was increasingly getting into the game. Fans were getting angry with each other. For all the talk of pride and the good vibes that came with this game, it was still the original rivalry. And it increasingly felt like that towards the end of the game. So, no, Victory fans in this new position, they've got the media in an Army Park. We're pretty close to where they're all standing over there in that corner. No,
Why
they were
have
pretty
they moved you?
Because they're not allowed behind the goals, Nick.
Oh, okay.
There was an incident in December. I'm not sure if you heard of it.
Yeah, but why'd they move the media?
Because there were sanctions in place. They're not allowed to go behind the goals. Oh, the media. Oh, no, they've moved the media because they're renovating the press box for the Women's World Cup, and we're not able to use it for the rest of the season. So we're instead in one of these little corporate boxes along the sides here using desks from somewhere as a makeshift tribune.
All right. Well, look, let us know your thoughts in the comments. So far, it's all, very superficial. Torres says Joey has David Attenborough hair. I don't know what. I've never really seen David Attenborough with that type of hair. Maybe he means that it should appear in like a nature documentary as a kind of study
it's tied up. I've got it tied up with like a little rainbow headband.
Into how humans have evolved. But but there's a question coming in from Andrew. What was the deal with the Rado burger chat? I have no idea what that's referring to. Joey, can you enlighten?
Rado was late to his press conference the other night because he was eating a burger, so I decided to bust his chops.
Okay. Well, you're someone who has, been on this podcast eating a burger, so I feel like it's a bit hypocritical from you.
Yes, but I'm not holding up exactly. I was on this podcast eating the burger. I didn't hold the podcast up until I'd finished my burger.
No. That's true. But anyway, did he eventually answer your questions after he?
He did. I sort of used it as a segue into Yes, as a segue into. Did you like your size performance more or less than the burger?
What did he say?
He preferred the burger.
Oh, it must have been a good burger because he were all right in that game.
No, he just wasn't impressed with his team's first half.
Okay. Well, I mean, it does raise an interesting question, which is when do A-League coaches get time to eat? If you think about, if a game takes place at 7:30, do they eat before the game? Probably they're busy with pre-match talks and introductions. So they're waiting till after a game. That's a pretty late dinner,
From what I've experienced with a lot of coaches, their biggest priority after a game is more a dart than food.
Okay, well, whatever floats your boat, but I feel like darts, you can even sneak one of those at half time. Whereas, can you get a bit of food? Like to me, actually, even if I was about to be approached by an A-League team, and let's say Brisbane Roar was like, Nick, we want you to take over, I'd have to consider when am I going to eat my dinner if all these games are happening kind of in that 7:30 p.m. Time. Taryn, people are complaining that you haven't spoken enough yet. Feel free to just talk over Joey. No problems with that. When do you like to eat your dinner?
Well, I'm quite an early dinner person these days. I used to be like at 7:30 and 8, but as I'm entering my old age, it is becoming I'm becoming more of a 6 o'clock dinner person. I don't know.
Oh, great.
It's really, but it's not.
Well, I have lost the people down in Melbourne, so this is going to be an interesting podcast.
No, we're back. We're back.
Oh, we're back.
What happened?
Did I was just talking about my 6 o'clock dinner, which is great.
So
I was justifying it.
We started talking about dinner, and Nick's microwave got jealous.
Yeah, I was going to say 6 o'clock dinner, very early, Taryn. That's like some retired old people. I don't even like having dinner when the sun is still up. So the 6 o'clock dinner is very offensive to me. Joseph says, is this a dietitian podcast? It is, unless the comments dictate it be something else. I just go with the flow. Someone asked about burgers, and that's where we're going today. Some more comments about Joey's appearance. Joey looks like he's about to sing Psycho Killer on full tilt. I'm going to have to trust the reference there. Alex says, City must be playing well if he can afford a buyer at the Etihad. Shake Your Booty 29, also against the early dinner. 6 p.m. dinner is for grandparents. So, look, 6 p.m. dinner, controversy. But look, let's talk a little bit about the Adelaide United Melbourne Victory game. Victory almost before Irankunda's wonder goal. They were almost kind of on track for, I think it was their third win in a row, which... Not
third win in a row, would have been their third win in 4 games.
Third win in 4 games. So and, we're looking at the tables, and I'm going to be talking about this a bit tonight as well, about how crunched, how bunched up from second till last, 10 teams are separated by, or 11 teams are separated by 10 points, which this far into the season is pretty amazing and is probably indicative of, where the league is at. And maybe this is the ideal of a salary capped competition, where everyone in theory has an even chance. Does it make for a more interesting league? That's another question. Does it make for better narratives? And, there is a feeling now of anyone can beat anyone except Melbourne City, but even Melbourne City is struggling a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. What are your feelings on Victory? Are you seeing a bit of a slide up?
I am seeing improvements in performance. It's remarkable that they've taken 7 points from their last 12 games, demonstrated improved performances, and they're still last. But I think there are signs of improvement. What struck me today was, again, they had less of the ball. It was 60-40% possession to Adelaide. But for all of Adelaide's control of possession, Victory created better chances. They finished the game with a higher XG. They created a higher volume of chances than Adelaide. And what took me watching Melbourne Victory in action today was I was thinking back to watching them earlier in the season, and they just looked more comfortable in the final third than they were early in the season. There wasn't panic. There wasn't them trying to force things. They were quite happy to move the ball around and try to find a better option in that final third. They're still a team that operates best when they have less of the ball and can work in transition, but there's just a little bit more clarity, purpose, and ideas in the final third, it appears now, than there was at the start of the season. So bearing in mind, they also have Fernando Romero to bring into the side and get him more and more minutes. So, like, as you were saying, Stoll, at this point, the gap between second and last is closer than the gap between first and second. So it is a tight league. And had they won today, they would have been just 4 points back of the top six with a game in hand. So thanks to this parity, thanks to the fact that their rivals haven't been able to, drive the stake through the heart of their campaign, I think Victory are showing signs of improvement. And you can't write them off at this point just because of the nature of the league.
It does set up a very interesting finals race. So many clubs bunched together, and actually could lead to a real final day of the season drama to see who gets in the top six, because so many clubs could be in contention for that. And previously, I think there's been a lot of talk about, why can't we do it like so many other leagues in the world where all the games are played at the same time on the last day of the season. But I've spoken to people kind of in TV, and they were saying, well, it's difficult from a production standpoint because you have to find, 6 different crews to work on 6 different games at once, as opposed to having people to work on, a game on the Friday night, and the same people can work on a game on a Saturday night, same people can work on a game on a Sunday night, for example. So that could be an issue.
We just spend one round doing what's awesome for the fans rather than what works for TV.
Well, what's awesome for the fans is that they can watch all the games and that we're covering all the goals coming in.
It's not like we have an entire season to plan for it or anything.
No, but, you just got to be realistic about these things. And also the fact that your ratings actually, as much as people get excited by it, it actually isn't great for the ratings, because instead of getting a nice bunch of numbers across the 5-6 games, it's all condensed into one, because people aren't going to watch all the 6 games across the weekend as they might do. I think, but look, it'll be interesting to see what they do this year. Maybe they can call it a festival of football. Who knows? But Victory, Adelaide, any final thoughts on this? I'll just say there was one moment in the second half that I really loved. And every now and again, there's just moments in football that I'm just really excited for and really happy for. Jason Guerrier playing a 1-2 kind of on the edge of the box and then hitting the bar. There's just like such a, I know Guerrier's kind of playing as like a right back, but I always think of Guerrier more of as like he's not a, marauding right fullback who is always kind of getting in the attack. That he's more of a defensive-minded player. And there's something about whenever you see a kind of like a centre back or something just get into the box with the ball at their feet, there's almost something funny about that moment. And there's something chaotic about this. Like, everyone in the crowd is like, how has he gotten there with a ball at his feet? Unfortunately, he smashed against the crossbar, but just the moment of chaos was really in the Make Australian Football Fun Society. Irankunda's goal was the number one thing of the week, but that Jason Guerrier moment was a really, really enjoyable moment.
Well, no, number 1A, 1B being Catherine Zimmerman's goal, but as we've already talked about. But not to make a serious point of your anecdote, Stoll, but that probably is indicative of the comfort levels and confidence that Victory are beginning to grow in the final third, in the case that you have, this is going to sound a bit more insulting than it actually is, but even Jason Guerrier is playing 1-2s and launching balls into the crossbar. So, when that's happening, you can tell the vibes are pretty good, or at least there's a level of confidence there amongst the squad, which there certainly hasn't been. There's been, not to, bastardize our own catchphrase, but there at times throughout the season, there looked like a real lack of ticker amongst Melbourne Victory's players, but you didn't see that today.
Yeah, and it was actually interesting to see Bruce Kamau come onto the field late for Victory.
He got booed by the Adelaide fans and the Victory fans when he came on.
Why did he get booed by the Victory fans? Because he's ex-City.
I don't know. He's ex-City, he's ex-Adelaide. Maybe they didn't think they needed him.
Bit harsh. He's only been at the club 8 minutes, and they're booing him. I just thought it was an interesting moment because Bruce Kamau was once the young, exciting attacker at Adelaide United, much like Irankunda is now. And Irankunda is younger than Kamau kind of was, I think, when he broke through, and they're a different they've got a different set of skills for sure, and maybe Irankunda's ceiling is higher. But there is also a bit of a cautionary tale there as well, which to look at and think, we get excited about these young players. And of course, Kamau scored, I remember, in a grand final for Adelaide. And, it really felt like, this kid's amazing. And now he's getting booed by both sets of fans as he comes onto the pitch at kind of 23. So it's an interesting kind of little A-League story just there. But any final thoughts on Victory Adelaide for you guys?
The men's game? No, it was a good day. Crowd seemed into it. Yeah, it was probably day went as well as it probably could have, I reckon. Good day. Good
Excellent. Good
day.
Good
sorry,
job.
what did I say? Carl Viet had a moan about the VAR again. Doesn't think that Melbourne Victory's penalty was a penalty. Says that we are should never have been reviewed. We're re-refereeing the games. And also one interesting point, actually, that was a bit new after we had the greatest hits of coaches complaining about the VAR, was that he said some of the blame lies on the players for hamming it up and trying to milk the VAR and trying to induce the VAR referee to get involved by emphasizing contact and looking to be dramatic with things, and players bore some responsibility for that, which was a new tact. I haven't heard that from any coach yet.
Interesting. What else you want to talk about?
Well, we got Taryn here, so we might as well just do the doubleheader today as well as the Pride, because Taryn does have to get home at some point. Taryn has people that love her and care about her and wonder where she is on a Sunday night. So, but yeah, as I said, Taryn, Melbourne Victory 2, Adelaide United 2 in the A-League Women's. Adrian Stenser post-game pretty much admitting that Adelaide United's finals hopes are pretty much extinguished at this point. Realistically, mathematically, they're still a way in. They've got Canberra and Perth across their next two games, so they will know something changes, but did feel that way, that their finals hopes were ended. Although Victory now, I mean, all of a sudden, they're falling right back towards the pack, aren't they?
Victory are such an interesting side in the dub, because I've always felt like they're, a lot of games this season they were sort of hauled. I mean, the last time that Victory played Adelaide, the reason why they won that game essentially was Alex Chidiac. And now without her there, it's they were already, especially with the losses of Melina Ayres and Kath Zimmerman earlier in the season, they were looking shaky on the goal front. This time around, they had both of those players starting, and both of those players made an enormous impact. But yeah, they're certainly, they're not the complete package, Melbourne Victory, and that's why they still don't look the complete side. They don't look a certainty to make finals whatsoever. There are teams coming up behind them, like Canberra, like Perth, who are looking in much better form. And yeah, it'll be really interesting to see sort of where their season goes from here, because I think that, today was an example of it where, you can see it's 90% there. The second goal in particular was a bit of a defensive howler, and it's those sorts of mistakes that they consistently make throughout the season. But that was the same the last two seasons, and they finished champions after finishing fourth. So, maybe there'll be a repeat, and, we'll be here sort of mid-season towards the end of the season going, oh, they don't look too good. And then they spring something out of nothing again. But, yeah, they're an interesting side to watch now, for sure.
It was really interesting watching the game as well. I know it's cliche to every time a player talks about, has a good game, oh, Matildas will go. And at this point, it's certainly in the Matildas attack, it's so settled that nobody else who's not already getting called up and getting caps is, going to break in at this point before the Women's World Cup. However, Beattie Goad was exceptional today on the wing. And Beattie Goad is a player that has had a lot of fans for quite a while because she did disappear off the radar for a little while, going over to the US and going playing college ball. She sort of disappeared off all but the hardcore fans, but she remains a really good player. And I think Beattie Goad, especially her versatility as well, she can play a variety of positions. Beattie Goad is the type of player who I think heading into Paris 2024, that's the type of player that we're looking at as stepping up in the inevitable generational change that is going to take place amongst, generational change that it should inevitably be taking place in the Matildas following the Women's World Cup and the commencement of a new cycle, as well as playing like Melina Reyes, who was so good at the start of the season and then picked up yet another hamstring injury. I'm still trying to figure out if she meant her opening goal today or if it was a cross that just sort of got away from her and Annalie Grove put it in a net. But she's another one of these players that if she can get fit and start banging in the goals again, it's not going to replace the hole that Chidiac leaves because they're completely different players. Yeah. But in terms of production-wise, in terms of Chidiac's absence leaves you a deficit of 3 goals, Ayres can get you those 3 goals in a different way. Yeah. So I think that's, the money ball theory. So that's going to be something to watch moving forward. I still think, like, Western with their 6-0 win today, Sydney FC, both absolutely playing finals. City win one more game. City absolutely playing finals. Still think victory, bit shaky, and I think if anybody's going to chase them down, it's Perth.
I think City, the difference is, right, City have Rojas and McNamara to come back. Obviously, we don't know how Holly McNamara is going to be. Like, we've seen her play 45 minutes in a friendly, but she hasn't made it back yet into competitive football as Nick Stoll walks off the screen.
Hi, Freya.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it just before, Joey, about, Beattie Goad and Melina Reyes, and imagine if you could like smoosh those 2 players together, because neither of them are the complete player. I think we saw Beattie Goad today, and it was almost frustrating at times because she was consistently in the right place. She was consistently intercepting. She was consistently pressing. She was doing all of these right things and then wouldn't pull the trigger. And you're like, Beatrice, like, pull the trigger.
Beatrice.
Like, shoot.
Beatrice.
Beatrice, like, full naming her at this point. There was another time where she was free as a bird on the back post, and I was behind the goals at that point where this action happened. And I'd have to see a replay to confirm this, but I didn't see her call for the ball. She was free, and she didn't, put her arms up and call for the ball. And it's, I don't know what that is. Like, it's like a bit of gumption, a bit of like oomph. But she just, if she can somehow capture that, I think she becomes a much more complete player because everything else is there. And then you compare her to someone like Melina Reyes, who in some ways is limited, but is just a goal scorer, just knows how to score goals, is a very physical player, knows how to win the ball in those situations. So, yeah, it's I do tell you what, though, in terms of Matilda's chat, Beattie Goad could really fill a hole, but I think the opportunities for that to happen are very limited at this point.
As we see, our friend Shen Henry, spot on as per, shout out to Goad for being one of the few promising parts of those early 2021 friendlies at the start of TG's tenure and then disappearing. And then on that, Tim Scott in the comments on YouTube, off topic, but I saw Tony Gustafsson at Byron Bay today while I was running a line. Top bloke. Stoll, you live in New South Wales. What was Tony G doing at Byron Bay? You're on mute. Stoll, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Not sure what Tony G was doing in Byron Bay, but I'm sure his shoes were looking mad. That's the important thing. Yeah, well, very good stuff. Anything else you guys wanted to discuss?
Well, I think it was Pride today. So whilst we have Taryn here, should probably discuss that. I mean, you were at Mardi Gras, you said last night, Stoll. I've never actually been to the Mardi Gras parade. I don't know whether it was the A-League's Pride Rounds, the talk of the town at Mardi Gras.
I don't think anyone knew it was happening at all. I did not hear one. I saw a couple of football jerseys. Some Brazilians were dressed in a pink Flamengo jersey. I don't know what that was, but no, didn't make waves up here in Sydney.
Well, I mean, it does, to be honest. Well, I'll defer to you, Taryn. Somebody who's a member of the community, who's observed this Pride Rounds, has observed football's relationship with the community in recent years. What did you make of the A-League's Pride Rounds more broadly before we get into the why?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm the first to be often really cynical about these things. I mean, I'll say that off the bat. That this was implemented in a way that was really was genuinely the way that you implement these things. There was education programs for I think 18 months prior to this event for Adelaide and Victory, and I know that staff and players throughout the league, men's and women's, were given education and were talked to about it, and that's the most important thing, because I think a lot of the time having discussions with a lot of people, the majority of people want to do the right thing, right? And the majority of people mean well and want the environment to be an inclusive environment, but when they come up against something that's not, or something that is that is bigoted, and in this case that is homophobic language, people don't know how to respond often, or people don't know how to make it an inclusive environment. And I think that those education programs are super, are the crux of changing a culture, because it means that the vast majority of us in the men's and women's game, who are good people that want to make an environment a safe and inclusive place for everyone, have the tools in order to do that. And so when we do have a Pride round like this, the players and the staff are able to advocate in a way that is, in a way that can create those spaces. And I think that's been really fantastic. Obviously, I think that the uneven nature maybe of the games and the way that it's been implemented by different clubs is maybe a little bit disappointing. That there are certain clubs that, it would have been great to see, I guess, for example, or different, every club having the chance to have a Pride kit, or every club having the chance to do something. And I know there are logistical issues involved in that.
I think that will be something targeted next year. I think that was delayed this year because you said the logistical issues, because they wanted to do the education with all the playing groups before. Like, I was told multiple times, threatens life and limb, do not report this beforehand because we haven't done the educational programs yet, because they really didn't want the narrative to get out there and to spoil it, and for like a Manly 7 situation to arise before they'd had a chance to speak to the club. So I think you can't exactly be putting orders with Macron or Umbro or something like that for Pride kits before you've actually spoken to the players. Yeah, for sure. And as I said, I think that's been the most pleasing part about it is that aspect. And that it's going to lay the foundation for initiatives and things to continue into the future, which is really great. And I'm not going to add anything to that. I think Taryn said it more. But the other thing, obviously, you see in the comments sections and all this sort of things, why this needed, why do we, when Josh comes out, why are we celebrating this, yada, yada, yada. For you, Taryn, why is Pride important?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. I think in football, and it is very often seen as an unsafe environment for the queer community. And I know I have friends and people very close to me that still, refuse to go to a men's game because they feel like they're not welcome, because they feel like they can't go. And, in issues like this, there would have been people today that went to their first game, genuinely. Yeah. There would have been people today who had never been to any game of football, or maybe had never been to a men's game, who've gone for the first time and feel safe and welcome. And you know, at the very beginning of the podcast, Joey, you said that, you know, yes, it started off as good vibes and pride, and then it was an original rivalry. But that's great. Like that's exactly how it should be. You should be able to go to a football game and like yell at opposition fans and get riled up at the ref, all the things that you do as a fan, and feel safe doing so, being who you are, you know, as a person, you know. So that's really wonderful, and I think that's, you know, that's kind of step one. But you know, I guess it's not. I think we have this idea, you know, we can forget the past so quickly. You know, I'm 26 years old, and
and you have dinner at 6 p.m.
Yeah, okay, but you know, like
you should be waking up at 6 p.m.
Oh, shut up, Stoll. I'm old. Let me be.
Old soul.
But already, like just in the last few years, there's been an enormous change, and we forget that. You know, like I remember growing up and we think of women's sport in particular as an especially safe space, and you know, well, it's all good, we don't really need it in the women's game, and surely it's, you know, like dressing rooms growing up was some of the hardest experiences I had growing up, and some of the places where I felt the least safe, because you know, you were terrified of stereotypes, you were terrified of, you know, I grew up playing cricket, and I remember it was there were like no out female cricketers, despite the fact that everyone, you know, you kind of knew, but no one was out, no one spoke about it. It was completely silent. Everyone, you were just silent about it. It was frowned upon if you were out, because that just wasn't the thing that you did. When I first got involved in women's football, like as a, you know, very intently, you know, played all my life, but sort of got very intently involved a few years ago. There was several out the jetties, but you know, there was several players who you know, you'd sort of look at their Instagrams and go, oh, something's out here, but they would never be public about being out. They'd never show pride. They'd never, because it was still so, there was still such a stigma attached, and you know, in a lot of cases there still is. And I think that,
and when we're talking about pride there, like, we're not talking about them like posting pictures at Mardi Gras or anything. We're talking about pride. That we're talking about, like, they weren't posting pictures just with their partners.
Yeah.
Like I will post pictures as a straight person, you know, in a relationship with a woman. I will post pictures with my partner and not think anything of it.
Yes.
Like, that wasn't happening. It's not like, we're not talking about like this. It's the things people take for granted.
Absolutely. It's being able to, yeah, you know, when I talk about pride, yeah, I mean, sure, go to Mardi Gras and have fun, dress however you want. Like, that's awesome. But I think just those simple things, like, yeah, being able to say, you know, this is my partner. Hey, first anniversary Instagram post. Yeah. You know, like those sorts of things. For so long, people have felt that they can't do that. And I think for football to create a space where that is okay, where, you know, kids coming through now have people they can look up to and go, oh, like, you know, she's, or he, or, you know, like for young boys as well, you know, obviously I'm speaking to my experience, but that's huge. If you're a teenage boy playing football and you're like, oh God, you know, I might, you know, discovering your sexuality, you can look at someone like Josh Cavallo and go, oh, this is actually possible. This isn't something I have to be ashamed of. And it's combating those feelings of shame. It's incredibly powerful, and it's an experience. It's difficult to kind of put that into words, but it is incredibly powerful, and it's something that, you know, It was lovely coming out here today, and while I missed the men's game, becoming an accredited C license coach, it was lovely to come and see the rainbow and to see the celebrations. It was really nice.
Good job, everyone. All right. Is there anything else to discuss from today's thing, or should we move on to... I mean, the thing I really want to talk about is the alleged incident between Ruben Zadkovic and a Perth Glory player. Now, Taryn, you're doing your C license coaching. That's pretty interesting how you say. Is there any kind of part of the license that says, like, probably don't punch a player during a training session? I don't know where that is in the license, but
you would think, like, that's a given. Like, I don't think that needs to be communicated.
This is why they have warning signs. This is why they say, like, don't drink bleach, because some people, they need to know.
Maybe it's a B license. You know, maybe it's a more advanced thing. Don't punch your players. You know, you need to get to the B to the A, and then
Maybe it's more advanced. So like at the B license, it's like basic kung fu, and then it's A level. It's like martial arts badges.
Yeah.
That's why they charge so much.
Maybe with the C license, maybe you do have to learn how to punch your player, and then by the B and the A, you're kind of like, all right, we can't do that anymore. You're not allowed to use that kind of cheat. But look, for what it's worth, Ruben Zadkovic did deny that he punched Coley. He said like it was just a kind of normal incident. He said, I think one of the other players had gotten injured in the five-a-side, so he jumped in, and then there was a tangle of legs, and there was a collision, and there was nothing more. But what I like about this story that's come out is that the PFA is investigating, and that to me is really exciting because it means we might have a show called Law and Order PFA. Dun dun, and then how did that Law and Order always start? These are the stories of blah, blah, blah. These are the stories of A-League players.
So which one? Because there's three. I have been watching Law and Order SVU. So
yeah, so remember how Law and Order SVU always start? Yeah.
It's like...
Anyway,
in New York City, sexually based offenses are considered especially heinous. In New York City, the dedicated detectives who investigate these vicious felonies are members of an elite squad known as the Special Victims Unit. These are their stories.
Dun dun. You gotta get the dun dun.
But we cut to PFA, right? And it's
in the A-Leagues, coaching incidents are considered especially heinous.
Exactly.
In Australian football, the dedicated unionists who investigate these vicious events are members of an elite squad known as the Professional Footballers Australia. These are their stories.
And then here's what I like about it is like one of the great things about SVU was Detective Elliot Stabler and Detective Olivia Benson. Right? Those two together, right? So
and Fintu Tuola and Munch.
And the guy who just died, yeah. RIP.
Oh.
Right? Anyway, but so it could be like Kate Gill and Bo Bush, the two co-chairs of the PFA, and they're like these hard-boiled detectives, and they go into clubs and they're like, all right, Zadkovic, and they play like good cop, bad cop with Zadkovic, and they get him in there, and they try and see if he'll break after 24 hours, and then there's a bit of a complication, and it all gets resolved after 48 minutes. And look, the A-League is on Channel 10, so therefore Law and Order has always been on Channel 10. And this is the perfect synergy. Let's make this happen. I think Law and Order PFA, and every week they can investigate. What happened at MacArthur regarding Dwight York. Or I don't know. Maybe that's a spin-off for Law and Order, the Football Coaches Union or whatever that one is. They can investigate kind of what's going on at all the A-League clubs. I think that would be a very great show. So look, another wonderful idea from me. But what do you guys think? Would you watch Law and Order PFA?
Oh, I'm leaving. No, this is where I'm taking my leave.
It's good.
Absolutely not. I'm going home to people who love me and who don't talk about Law and Order PFA.
It's 9:10. She's 3 hours late for dinner.
3 hours late. I've got to go.
Well, I was just gonna say, are these people worried that you haven't eaten dinner 3 hours past your bedtime?
You're so crestfallen. You went with this wonderful Law and Order PFA. I'm like, no, I'm not having that. I need to go have my dinner.
But you still got me still.
Yeah.
Well, yes, and the comments. Let's have a look at some of these comments. Law and Order PFA detectives discovered the Sydney FC conspiracy. Yes, that would be amazing. They'd have to investigate the media, of course, because the media is biased to think. Forget Law and Order. Everyone remember Lie to Me with Tim Roth. Great show. I like people just suggesting. Just tell us your great shows. Tell us whatever. Is this TNC Law and Order? Potentially. But Law and Order goes for a nice, crisp 48 minutes. Whereas TNC would be lucky to go for such a short time. Law and Order, Shaky Booty 29 says Law and Order TNC investigates the disappearance of Ante. That's more of a X-Files, innit? X-Files TNC Files. Look, I think it's a good idea, but we do believe that Ben Smith will come on this podcast later to tell us what's going on. Because on a very serious kind of note, if a coach punches a player, then that coach should obviously be fired. If that is what happened, that's a pretty insane thing, right? Now, the fact that Perth Glory, the fact that Perth Glory are standing by him, either says to me two things. It either says to me that they spoke to everyone, they saw what happened. It wasn't that big a deal. It wasn't an actual punch or whatever it was, and whatever Zadkovic's events are true. That's the best case scenario, is that it is overblown and da-da-da. The worst case scenario is that you just made it okay for people to punch each other at work. Like, that's going to get weird because suddenly can like Tony Sage come through and just like haymaker, Ruben Zadkovic for not winning today. A player's going to come off the pitch and they're just going to get uppercuts, like what's going to go on at Perth Glory? So I just say that I hope that Ruben Zadkovic's events are truthful, but I just couldn't fathom how a coach could punch a player and keep his job. It just would set a very weird precedent, I would imagine.
Well,
although it would make for a fascinating Access All Areas episode.
He's already had one of those. But it undoubtedly, has to be said to have had a destabilizing effect. Earlier today, Brisbane Roar defeating Perth Glory 2-1. I obviously couldn't watch that game because I was out here at Amy Park. But, I mean, Brisbane haven't won a lot of football games as of late. And now all of a sudden this breaks and then...
Perth aren't exactly flying. But that's
they're not exactly
also
flying.
Maybe because the motivational techniques aren't quite working down at Perth Glory training.
Well, but I mean, and not only that, they've come from behind to win 2-1. And it was interesting, looking at Zadkovic's comments, Zadkovic hinting at people either inside or outside the camp deliberately trying to destabilise Perth Glory, which, it's interesting. Leaks have always happened.
Kick to the teeth.
But, leaks have always happened at clubs and, people do stuff to try to further their own interests. But to have a coach outright come out and say that, I think is interesting because we already have had reports out of Perth Glory once this season that there's been training ground bust-ups and players have been dropped as a result of that. Other players have disappeared out of the lineup. Some players have never appeared in the lineup. What is actually going on at Perth Glory, feels really interesting because we've had all the good vibes, surrounding Fortress Macedonia Park, selling that out. It's like a return to Perth Oval or, chicken treat is back, yada, yada. But then all of a sudden this happens. It almost feels like Perth Glory just can't really have nice things, can they? Just when something's going a bit good for them, this comes out and destabilizes them. So we'll chat up to Ben about that and the game more. But yeah, as funny as it is, it could have potential serious effects on Perth Glory if these leaks continue and we already see more destabilizing things. I saw one tweet today that was hastily deleted, saying that this is continuing and all of that sort of stuff. So what's next is the question.
What do you mean this is continuing? The punching?
Just that the investigation was continuing and that footage had been lost. And that tweet was... And the PFA was...
Yeah,
and that tweet was then deleted.
Yeah, so basically there was an accusation that training footage or something had been deleted. And
the PFA was still investigating. So and then the tweet got deleted.
In the Law and Order kind of that's your classic so the first 10 minutes of the thing they set you up to the red herring. They give you a little bit of a this person is the perpetrator. Here's what's actually going to happen. We all think it was Ruben Zadkovic, but it's going to turn out that it was Tony Sage or someone else.
Collie punched Zadkovic.
Yeah, or something like that. Or the reason that he punched him was because, actually Perth Glory is becoming an MMA team or something like this, right? You got to have a nice kind of twist in the third act that really makes you go, oh, I didn't pick that one. Just if that story keeps going, I think there's going to be more twists in that. But, just very quickly on the game, good win for Brisbane, important win for Brisbane. Obviously comes after Warren Moon got sacked. It's good for them to get the win, obviously against the Perth team that wasn't very good. And rough for Perth to see Darryl Latchman go off with what appeared to be a kind of head injury towards the end. The ambulance had to come onto the field, and he was taken away in an ambulance. So I don't know what happened there. Maybe.
What do you make of Nick Green's appointment? It's a bit of an odd one.
I mean, look, I'll be honest with you. I don't know what's going on at Brisbane. 99 problems, but now a coach appointment isn't one. I don't know. I don't know what the situation is there.
Bloke was coaching in private academies. Wasn't even senior NPL coach since 2020.
100% record so far. I don't know. Look, I'll see how he goes. I don't know anything about him, and people up in Brisbane can tell us like who. But what I think is interesting now is that the A-League has definitely transitioned from. We're not really bringing in international coaches anymore. Like, remember for a while, it was like half the league was international coaches, and there was Australian coaches were kind of complaining about their lack of opportunities. It doesn't really feels like, Dwight York, kind of the last international coach, or the last big international coach, and that experience hasn't gone well for him. And I don't feel too many will be coming in the near future, both because they're expensive, and also because. No, it doesn't seem like too many of them have come here and had a good experience. So, I mean, look, it's good.
Well, it's just two that have ever won the league, isn't it? Guillermo in season 1.
No, Levichka won the league with Sydney FC in 2010.
Oh, no, the championship I'm talking. Did he win the championship as well?
Yeah, because I think Aloisi scored on the last day of the season that stunning goal where he smacked it kind of top corner. I don't know. Let us know. I believe it's more. So Guillermo won the championship. Levichka won the championship. Libarski won the championship. Who was old mate from Melbourne City with the glasses?
Eric Mombat didn't win the championship. He lost in the grand final.
Yeah, but he set up that team so they'd win the league. All right.
Maybe is that the market inefficiency? Foreign technical directors,
potentially. Look, whatever. Brisbane and Perth. You know what I like about where you are right now? I can hear seagulls in the background. They don't just come when there are games happening. I can actually hear the seagulls in the background. Torres is making the point. He was a youth coach at Hartlepool. Isn't that enough? I don't know, Torres. Good point. Maybe that is enough.
And Warren Joyce was a youth coach for Man United. Look how that's true.
Happy Carrot says, here's ones. If you put all A-League men's coaches in the ring together to fight each other, who would be last man standing? I mean, that does sound like more like a wrestling thing. I don't really understand how last man standing
if we were to have
together?
A Face of the Revolution ladder match, watch AEW on ESPN. See, people talk about this, though, and they're always like tipping like guys like Rudin and Popovich. Those guys are still carrying like injuries from their playing career. You got to take that stuff into account. Like who's lithe enough to win a match, not just who's the biggest bloke.
It's true. Look, I don't know. Let us know who you think would win in a fight. I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like it would be whoever's the most tactically savvy, because I reckon I know you never had this experience, Joey, but basically at Greek Easter, you get these like red eggs, which you have to like smash onto everyone else. Now, it is last man standing or last woman standing to see who wins. Now, the best tactic that you can do is to avoid getting your egg in fights, basically. Let everyone else crack against a few other people. Just try and avoid it for as long as you can. You probably got 30 seconds. Just no. Just wait and wait and wait. And then you just the last person, you just get a 50-50 shot and kind of crack it in things. So I don't know. But I think we should welcome, as we talk about Perth Glory, Ben Smith to the pod. Ben, how are you, my friend?
Hello, Nick. Hello, Joey. How are you doing tonight?
Very good. So the question has been raised, if all A-League men's coaches got into a ring, who would win in a fight, in a last man standing fight? I kind of said whoever was most tactically savvy and would stay out of trouble. I don't think like full prone aggression would win. Potentially John Aloisi, one of the nicest guys in Australian football. Maybe
he's got a heart condition. But he's got a heart condition.
That is true. That is true. Well, but let's be honest, probably Zadkovic.
Or Carl Viet could. I feel like Carl Viet might go berserker mode. Like seeing that cut up of him, like I fuck on the sideline.
I think the problem with that is that he'd get too angry too early and he'd waste his energy. So I think that would be his kind of issue. I mean, look, we don't know. This new Brisbane Roar coach, he might be. I mean
Montgomery was a pretty hard man as a player.
That's true. Yeah, Montgomery's a good shout, actually. That's a good one. He's young as well. I like it. Ben, any comments or legally could this get you in trouble?
I feel like I don't know who would win in a fight because at least 9 of them would just sit back and wait for someone else to throw a punch before then they'd try to throw a counter. So, like, I don't know.
It's a good. It's a very good point. So Shaky Booty reckons Graham Arnold would beat everyone up then leave, and Corica would walk in, kick one bloke, and take all the credit for the next 3 seasons. Outstanding. I mean, little harsh on Bimby, but it's a very good point.
But Ben, legit.
No,
what happened at Perth?
Yeah, Ben, explain.
It was a normal day in the history of Perth Glory Football Club, is what happened.
You guys are the massive banter club of the A-League.
This is, as Jose Mourinho would say, this is football heritage, or as Ruben Zakovic said earlier this season, this is A-League football. So yeah, it was obviously, I think we all saw the rumours on, I believe it was Thursday, that there was an A-League coach who had allegedly attacked a player or had been involved in an altercation with a player.
Yeah, and everyone thought it was Roots, and everyone should egg on their face, all right? Because everyone went a little too early with it's Roots. It was Roots for sure. Boom.
Yeah, well, then obviously, word got around among, journalists. Vince Rigari, I think, was the first to break the news that it was Zakovic who was the coach in question at the, at the centre of the alleged altercation, and the player was Giordano Colli. And obviously on Friday, or rather on Thursday night, the club came out and said that they'd spoken to Colli, they'd spoken to Zakovic. They were satisfied that it was a storm in a teacup. It had been blown out of proportion. And then Zakovic fronted the media.
And sorry, this incident
Friday
was meant to have happened months ago, right? Like, it wasn't happened this week.
No, it happened this week, Tuesday morning.
It happened this week.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I thought this
happened
months ago, and it all been cleaned up.
The incident which sparked the fire was happened, I believe it was Tuesday training. Zach Duncan hurt his knee during a 5v5, so Ruben Zakovic decided he was going to slot in, and Zakovic said he collided with Colli, and there was, and from that it's turned into Zakovic was involved in an altercation with Colli, where, I believe there was an allegation that he threw a punch at Colli. Zakovic has, the club have said there was no complaint internally. The PFA have told me yesterday that they are not investigating the case any further. They are satisfied with the club's explanation that it was an incident that was blown out of proportion. I did see stuff on Twitter circulating today which said the PFA are still investigating. I can tell you that is not the case. I spoke to the PFA yesterday. They said they're satisfied with the club's explanation.
Well, just on this,
and
the earlier part of the show, but basically, I pitched a show to the world, which was Law and Order PFA. And look, I think just from the PFA's perspective, if you want this show to be successful, you need to have a bit more interesting resolutions than, like, I never watched an episode of Law and Order SVU where, Stabler and Olivia they finished the episode by just asking someone, did you do it? And they were like, no. And then it was like, all right, nothing to see here. And then, executive produced by Dick Wolf. That's not how these script writers need to work on that. But that's okay. That's okay. We're writers. We'll teach them how to do it. But it's interesting that that's come to that resolution. So it's your understanding that it wasn't, he hasn't just punched, Zakovic hasn't punched a player. It was more like your training ground thing that happens.
The incident in question, Zakovic was asked at his press conference on Friday, did you punch Colli? And he said, no, that didn't happen. I asked Zakovic as well whether training was filmed during the incident in question. Zakovic said he was not aware. He said that part of a session was not filmed on camera. He said they film, if it's a tactical session, they'll film the entire session. He said the session in question on Tuesday wasn't a tactical session. The incident happened in a 5v5, and that 5v5 drill was not filmed on camera. So as far as Zakovic,
why would you need to film 5v5 drills? There's not much you're going to garner from filming 5v5s. Except, obviously, who did Zadkovic punch? I'm just kidding. He's denied it. It's all good.
Who's TNC's legal counsel, by the way?
Mickey Mouse.
Ante. Ante is, and now he's on an alien spaceship. So unlucky.
But I had a question.
You'll be representing yourself in court.
I had a question about from some of Ruben's remarks, it felt like he insinuated that this was a deliberate effort to destabilise the club, and there was someone, be it internally or externally, throwing grenades into the camp. I guess two-parter. We've seen today that they lost to Brisbane Roar, a Brisbane Roar team that doesn't win a lot of games. How destabilising do you think this has been for the club? And do you think somebody actually is out to get Ruben?
Well, it's interesting because if you remember earlier in the season, before a game, there was, pre-game rumblings that Mark Beavers and Ryan Williams had fallen out with Ruben Zadkovic. Glory won that game, and Zadkovic said after the game when he was asked about it that he thought someone was having a lend of the media, and that they were kind of there was a rumor circulating that was completely said that at the time that Beavers Williams were leading in. So it's not. This is the first instance that where there's been, utter disgruntlement within the changing rooms at Perth Glory. And one thing I've noticed with Ruben throughout this season is he's very big on creating a siege mentality. He talks about
no one believes in us.
Adversity for this season with a schedule, pretty much. But he did point out that they played a lot of away games at the start of the season, which that was adversity. And then when they finally got home games, there was 4 in 13 days or something. So that was some adversity. He's very good at picking things to at least just, I don't know if he repeats it within the walls of of Glory HQ, but at least to the press, he talks a lot about the club overcoming adversity. And this felt like another chance for him to, further build that siege mentality. It obviously didn't work this weekend. I thought they were pretty poor against Brisbane after taking the lead. It was a really disappointing performance. And especially against the Brisbane side who hadn't won in almost 2 months.
Look, what I'd say as well is that, if anyone was trying to destabilize the club, why would you? It's already pretty destabilized. It's not like this club is flying, winning championships. They've won 4 Asian Champions League in a row. We need to take them down a peg. And second, a lot of that adversity he's talking about is kind of a bit, self-inflicted by the club and the way that it's been run over the years. So,
nobody made the club try to talk to the London Football Exchange.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, that was a destabilizing effort by the old Jim Ale.
I think Perth Glory watched that Game of Thrones episode where Littlefinger said chaos is a ladder. And they were like, we're going to climb that ladder. But then they got stuck on the 3rd rung and have been there ever since.
It is an interesting time. Look, Ben, what else do you want to talk about? We've got you on the show. I have to go in the next couple of minutes. So
I'll take over.
I don't really know how I'm going to wrap my part of the show. But I guess just say very, very quickly... we forgot to say 2 things. One, great to see Paul Izzo, H to the Izzo, retaining the A-Liga men's belt because Melbourne Victory got the draw. That was enough to retain the belt. And also Jake Brimmer's injury. That could be a bit interesting. Did you hear anything about that, Joey?
So, Luch Trainee, after the game today, saying that it doesn't look good. You couldn't get a proper diagnosis on today because of the swelling. So you'll have to let the swelling go down a little bit more before you can do a proper scan to see what the damage is. Obviously, the fears with this are always ACLs. The nature of the way that his leg twisted during the game could be MCL, PCL type ordeal, which could just be a 10-week sort of thing, which in theory would mean he could be back for finals football. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how Victory responds. Obviously, you don't want it to be a massive ACL for Jake Brimmer because, sort of at 24 years old now, we've obviously talked about what he brings to teams, what he doesn't bring to teams on the football pitch on this podcast. At 24, if he was going to make a move, and I know his family situation is complicated, which adds another wrinkle to it, but if he was going to make a move overseas, this was about around the time you'd want to be starting pressing and trying to start, having clubs look at you. I understand that maybe one or two SPL clubs were looking at him during the off-season, but ultimately didn't make a move. So if he has done a long-term injury, that's obviously bad for him, bad for Victory's immediate season, because as much as we talk about what he doesn't bring and what he does bring a lot to that side. He's won a few games and got a few points for Victory with his set pieces alone, but it's also not good for him long-term.
Look, very interesting. I have to go, but thanks and success. Good luck to everyone. It has been a pleasure. Great job by all. Talk to you soon.
Well, as I take over for Nick Stoll, Ben, we'll talk about some A-League men games in a second, and you can feel free to put in that little private chat box which ones you have watched and which ones you haven't, so we can talk about that. But also want to ask, you published another interview with James Johnson. I think it was yesterday that it came out, talking about the Women's World Cup legacy. Why don't you walk us through that?
Yes, it was indeed. Yeah, I had a chat with James. He was in Perth last month, and we had a very brief window to chat. But I was, nice being a man in person, and I had this idea of what does 2023 look like for Australian football. I wanted to write an article about that. Obviously, the Women's World Cup is, very much at the forefront of that. But there's also a lot of other things. And, James spoke about, National Second Division, for instance, which, since we've had the chat, there's been a bit of progress on that. We spoke about, the way forward for the Socceroos and the lead into not just the Asian Cup in January, but, the fact that this year represents the start of another World Cup cycle, even though we've just literally finished the last one. And also, the way forward with Graham Arnold, spoke a bit about, from a WA perspective, being based out west, what does he see Perth's role in this, this incredible year that, Australian football has planned. And, hopefully he's strongly hinted there may be a Socceroos game coming Perth's way. Sam Kerr's certainly spoken about the fact she wants a women's Matildas game in Perth, which, might be hard pressed to get one before the World Cup at the rate we're going. But, perhaps towards the end of the year, that's something that could happen. But yeah, I also spoke about, just on the Women's World Cup, what does a successful tournament look like, not just on the field and off the field? And James basically said legacy. This tournament isn't going to be measured as a success, in a month after. It's going to be 5-10 years down the line. Will we have, if there are adequate facilities put in place as because of this World Cup, is there going to be, will governments come to the party and, upgrade facilities and, make sure that, local clubs have increased women's changing rooms, for example? Like, that's the sort of thing that he wants to see, 5-10 years down the line from this World Cup.
Because that has been one of the things, for all the talk about legacy throughout this Women's World Cup, I mean, what it could mean to very different people. The friends we make along the way are not a sufficient legacy for this Women's World Cup. So, and it sounds like that's sort of what James Johnson was saying. So it's when the specifics of what he sees as a legacy, it feels like we know he's big on facilities because Graham Arnold said we need a home of the Socceroos about 50 billion times since he's been reappointed as coach. And it sounds like that. Did he give anything else beyond facilities about what he sees as legacy?
Not really. I think, he did actually say, he wants to, he hopes, down the line that this leads to, more females involved in the game, obviously, which, I'm sure it will. But he also said at boardroom level, at governance level within football circles, he would also like to see this World Cup being a starting point to see more females filtering into those roles. I'm sure, I don't have the numbers at hand, but I'd say if we look at most, governance circles, both, state and, national federation level, but also, at, grassroots clubs I would probably guess that they are still predominantly male orientated. So that's a big goal for him, to change the way that, the game is run, with more females involved in the decision-making process.
Perhaps maybe an indication of what he might be looking for in terms of a successor. But we'll move on, mate, now maybe to some of the other A-League men games. We've gone through a few of them. But, well, yesterday, I think two really jump out to me. Melbourne City 3, Sydney FC 2. I was at that game, and the 3-2 scoreline is perhaps a bit deceiving, given that Diego Caballo scored a free kick for Sydney FC with the last kick of the game. But yet again, Marco Tilio really taking over the stage. And it's been really interesting to watch Marco's progression throughout this season, because obviously at the very beginning of the campaign prior to the World Cup, he was on the bench. And Patrick Isnorbo, remember him, was getting a lot of questions about whether or not he was starting. Could he go to the World Cup? He eventually starts, misses the World Cup squad initially. Then he gets brought in because Martin Boyle's injured, doesn't play a single minute at the World Cup, but now he's a regular starter under Rado Vidicic. And, well, he's scored with a very healthy assist from the fact that Sydney FC defence briefly thought COVID was still a thing and they needed to give Marco Tilio 2 or 3 metres of space, but scored one of the goals of the season. But Tilio feels like he's ready to go overseas to me. It's now just a matter of where does he go, and is he going to be put in the situation to succeed? That's what it feels like to me. It feels like we talk about players needing minutes. He's got enough minutes. He's got enough games. He's got enough resume. He's now ready to go overseas to a situation that suits him.
Yeah, and I'm going to be very interested to see where he actually ends up. You talk about a good situation. Will he go the way of someone like an Aaron Moy, where he ends up at a club, owned by the City Football Group? Is that his, pathway out of Australia and into Europe? But yeah, he was great yesterday. He's been, like you say, he's been very good since Rado Vidicic took over. And, I do feel, I do get the sense that Rado is a bit more of a, fatherly figure, so to speak, than Paddy Kisnorbo was. But yeah, Tilio looks a bit more refreshed. He's obviously been given a bit more game time under, Rado Vidicic. The goal he scored yesterday, like you say, some very suspect Sydney defending. I saw someone describe it or liken their defending on that goal to when they have a Make-A-Wish kid on the pitch during a charity game. It was pretty poor. But, he took advantage of it. You see all the time in A-League men's games, lax defending, not punished. He absolutely took, they gave him, a couple of inches and he took an arm. And that's the sign of a player in confidence. He just looks, he's such a fun player to watch when he gets the ball at his feet. He's got a bit more. It feels like he's got a bit more bounce in this, in his step. And long may it continue, because Lord knows we lack players of his ilk in terms of his player profile. He's a fantastic player with the ball at his feet. He loves dribbling. We really lack that in Australian football. So for him to still be doing this on a regular level bodes really well for the future.
I think he's adjusted really well to Rado Vidicic's, license, a bit more creativity, a bit more less regimented style in attacking. Richard van der Ven, another player that's clearly really enjoying that. Valon Berisha lit up like a Christmas tree when I asked him about it last week. So there's players that are enjoying that. You mentioned, will he follow the Aaron Moy and Daniel Arzani route in staying within the CFG? It is interesting to note, though, that the past couple of young players that have come out of Melbourne City and went to Europe didn't stay in the CFG. Nathaniel Atkinson, obviously, heading off to Hearts, and Connor Metcalf, albeit Connor Metcalf's contract was ending, but heading off to St. Pauli in the German second division. So I don't think it's necessarily a fait accompli that Marco Tilio will remain in the City Football Group system. At the end of the day, CFG they are a business, and if they think that they're best served by getting a profit on Tilio now rather than later, I'm sure they'd happily sell him or move him onto a club outside the family if it brought in more money. But two other things from this game we'll get through briefly. One, Jamie McLaren is now 4 goals away from Besart Berisha as the all-time A-League's goal-scoring leader. He's obviously scoring for fun this year. Where do you actually rank Jamie McLaren, Ben? Obviously, he spent some time at Perth, even though he often subtweets Perth these days whenever he's asked in interviews about them. But where do you rank, not in terms of statistically, but in terms of the all-time great goal scorers in the A-Leagues, where do you rank Jamie McLaren?
It's an interesting question because, for all, the quibbles you can have with his build-up play, of the fact that he's a striker who predominantly likes to sit on the last shoulder of defenders. He's not someone who's going to come to the ball and, be a false nine, so to speak. He's very much a, I'm going to beat you in behind the line sort of player, which, against low blocks can be problematic for the team. But, when he scores as many as he does, in a way that makes up for it. He doesn't have the robustness of a Besart Berisha, or he doesn't have the link-up play of a Bruno Fornaroli or an Ola Toivonen, who obviously wasn't here anywhere near as long, but still had that. He was he was a Rolls Royce of a player, and just the sort of player who just kind of could do a little bit of everything, but very, very well. But yeah, it kind of feels like he should be a bigger star within Australia, and maybe if he'd been able to translate that form for the Socceroos, like a Craig Goodwin or a Matthew Leckie had, maybe his star would be a bit bigger. But he's undoubtedly an A-League great at this point. I mean, it's kind of hard to argue against that. I still think if we're talking about longevity, I think I'd still rather have a Bruno Fornaroli or a Besart Berisha. But he's definitely probably number 3 or number 4 in terms of from a personal point of view. I think he's his just ability to score goals at this level. We shouldn't take it for granted. As much as we can critically analyze his build-up play, goals win games, and he has always just been the sort of striker who knows to find himself in the right place at the right time.
It's going to be interesting to see also the Socceroos we know will be playing during the March international window games, probably set to be officially announced soon. But it's going to be interesting to see who starts up front for the Socceroos in those games. I'm inclined to think that with the games likely to be on home soil, we will get close to basically a tribute act to the World Cup. Basically, here are the World Cup boys, have your moment in the sun, which leads me to believe that Mitch Duke will be starting. Obviously, some players might not be fit, other players might not want to come back from the other side of the world just for a bit of a tribute act. But moving forwards, it is going to be fascinating to watch that number 9 slot, because obviously now Mitch Duke going back to the J2, I imagine he's probably regretting agreeing to a J2 move before the World Cup, because who would have known, who knows what he could have gotten after the World Cup. But heading into this World Cup cycle, who is given first dig at leading the line for the Socceroos? Is it Jason Cummings? Is it Jamie McLaren? Is it Mitch Duke? Adam Taggart struggling to see the field at Perth Glory, but he scored 2 goals on debut. Is it one of the new generations coming through, somebody like a Toure or someone like that? So that's going to be really, or D'Agostino, does he take like a duck to water to Viking? So I think that's going to be really interesting to watch moving forward, not just because we know Jamie McLaren's going to keep scoring for Melbourne City. He's having to adjust to Rados Vidicic's system, because so much of his game was built upon psychic understandings with these players, and this regimented, if this player is here, I'm going to make my run here and the ball is going to be here. When there's a bit more improvisation within that system and players are allowed to freelance, inevitably there is going to be a learning period for Jamie McLaren as he tries to figure out how he fits in that, and he has to try to predict patterns of play a little more. But he's adjusting. I mean, as we saw against Sydney FC. So we know he's going to score for Melbourne City. It's where does he fit in the Socceroos squad for the next 4 years, which I'm interested to see. Now, there were 2 games playing yesterday, Amy Park. Sydney FC falling to another defeat. Their recent run of good form snapped by Melbourne City. They're now 6th. Is this, Ben, do you think 6th, where they are right now, part of this log jam, it's about their level this season?
I think so, but, it just feels like every A-League men's club should be it almost feels like they deserve to be in the bottom 4 or just outside the finals, but because there's so many of them, by just process of too many teams are really abjectly boring and average this year, some are going to end up playing finals. And I wouldn't, if you told me now that Sydney would play finals, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think they're particularly great. But Wellington, feel like they're in free fall a bit. Sydney have, I think up until the loss yesterday, they had 10 points from their last 4 games. They were starting to pick up a bit of momentum. When you've got guys like, Robert Mack and Joe Lolly, who I quite like, when you've got a Max Burgess type who can, cut open a game with a moment of brilliance, then, I wouldn't rule them out, because I feel like this A-League season is going to come down to moments, Melbourne City, for me, are by far the best team, and I think Central Coast are by far the second best team. Western Sydney, obviously, are just below them, and, but everyone else, even Adelaide in 4th spot, I haven't been blown away by them. Western Sydney, I haven't been blown away by. Wellington, like I said, are in free fall. I'd say most of those teams will probably play finals, but none of them are doing enough week in, week out to convince themselves that they should be entrenched in that top 6. And this is why I think Sydney is still a good chance, because they just, Corica just has that, his team knows how to get it done previously. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do it again.
Well, it's interesting you say, we'll move on now, and it sort of provides a nice segue. But actually, before we'll go through a few of the comments. Toro's on YouTube, talking about our discussion with James, your discussion with James Johnson, saying a good legacy for the Women's World Cup would be financial help in getting women to take more of their C, B and A licenses. There is a massive gender disparity in coaching. Of course, congratulations to our own Taryn Heddo, who was on before, who completed her C license today. She knows more than any of us, so she'll be running Australian football eventually. I have the moment saying that Rado is correct in that Marco Tilio should be in no rush, unlike Arzani a few years back. I think Arzani was ready as well, but I agree with I have the moment on the either moment on the first point that Tilio can be in no rush and pick his right setup. Arb, I'm going to say AAA, AAB. On YouTube saying if Jota or Adaba move on from Celtic, maybe Tilio can link up with Ange at Celtic. And then Happy Carrot saying if Tilio moves overseas, where would his best move be? Scotland or like Belgium, the Netherlands level? I think it's less about actual country that he goes to, more just where will he see games. And there's no set style of play in any country's league. There are patterns and prevalences, but really it's about picking the right team and the right squad. I mean, what happens is, he needs to go to a free-flowing team, so he should sign a free-flowing and attacking team, so he should go to La Liga. Next minute signs with Atletico Madrid. So there's no hard and fast rule for where teams go. But we'll now use that segue. You were saying Central Coast Mariners, for you, Ben, easily the second best team in the A-Leagues. Because we did have a conversation a few weeks ago, and we sort of reached a consensus that in a one-off game, so a grand final, in a one-off game, Western Sydney was the team most likely to beat Melbourne City in a one-off game. Now, that was based purely on their their defensive fortitude and how well they were able to frustrate Melbourne City in their draw early in the season. Well, they came out and spanked MacArthur last night, 4-0. Borrello, Amalfitano, Schneiderlin, Neuenhoff on the score sheet. Craig Noon red-carded in the 6th minute. Now, MacArthur are in a bit of a free fall at the moment, another team, so maybe pinch of salt for hammering them. But Wanderers, so you've got Mariners as your second best team in the league. How far are the Wanderers from that?
It's interesting because, I firmly believe that Central Coast best is better than Western Sydney's best. But Western Sydney, as you guys have alluded to, just have this ability to Western Sydney just have this ability to eke out games and get results that they maybe shouldn't have. That's a Marco Redan team. They're very good at grinding out results from losing positions or tough positions. So I can completely envision a game where Central Coast are dominating Western Sydney in a semi-final, say, and Western Sydney just walk away 1-0 winners or something because they score one on break and batten down the hatches for the final half an hour. I think MacArthur, Milos Stojovski has a lot on his plate there. It just feels like they're a disaster right now, and it feels like it's falling apart on the field and off the field for them as well. So, like you say, we should take it with a pinch of salt. But, Western Sydney are plucky. They'll just pick up results. That's what they do. Adding Morgan Schneiderlin, signing for them and someone of his class, and then Leuni as well, who, as we spoke, as you spoke, that's a fantastic goal he scored against Adelaide. He seems to have that Michael's secret stuff is. So, and that's as we've kind of alluded to, that's kind of what you need. Like I said earlier, A-League. I feel like this A-League season is going to be decided in moments, and guys like Schneiderlin and Brandon Borrello, who's hitting some really good form, and Leuni, they've got guys who can produce something. So, as much as I think it's a better team than Western Sydney at their best, you can't write off Western Sydney's ability to just get something.
Will be interesting to move forward. We'll quickly get through the other A-Liga men's games that took place this weekend. Again, there's two that I haven't had a chance to dive into in detail yet because of other commitments. But Western United 3, the Jets 1. The box office was looking good for a while, but can you really call any side the box office Jets when they're losing 3-1 to this Western United team, I guess? I mean, Western United, I guess, Ben, to follow on in your point, this is a team that shouldn't be playing finals based on what we've seen from this season. At times, they've been absolutely abject. No team in this competition has conceded more goals than Western United this season, which is remarkable when you take into account the fact that their defence pretty much carried them to a championship last year. But here they are. They're getting a win over the Jets, and now they're just 5 points behind Sydney FC on the table. Just 2 wins, and all of a sudden they're in the finals places again. And, well, what's been interesting to me with Western as of late, it's the bloke that's playing up front for them, not Alex Prijovic, sort of like mini Alex Prijovic in Noah Botic. He's always been, for me, someone who's been a really exciting prospect, but sort of like he's had some really shocking luck over the years. Like he sort of like had some breakout performances as an under-17 with the Joey, scoring a lot of goals coming out of Rockdale, had Manchester United interested in him before he ended up signing for Hoffenheim. But then COVID hits, and COVID sort of destroys youth development for a lot of clubs around the world. Botic, when he's at Hoffenheim, he's not here in Australia. He's not the shit-hot prospect that's going to save Australian football. He's not the next Mark Viduka. He's just some random kid that Hoffenheim has no real interest in. So he obviously doesn't kick on there. He comes back, has a number of issues seeing the field early last season for a variety of reasons that ultimately scupper that campaign. Now he's actually playing. Now he's scoring goals. And we're actually seeing potentially, ironically, it's a player in their early 20s might be saving John Aloisi and John Aloisi's season.
Yeah, Botic, he's the prince that was promised, wasn't it? And it's taken a while for him to actually, reach reach that point. But it's just nice to see, as you alluded to, him getting game time under John Aloisi after, he barely saw the field last year. And, it's testament to his resilience as well. The fact that he has finally been afforded this chance, he's been able to take it, which, all too often we see, young Australian players, show something early in their career and then, they kind of hit some fortune or have some bad luck or they fall out of form and they can never quite recapture that, but those early signs. So, it's good to see Bodic, put another, I hope that, Prijovic has kind of taken him under his wing a bit and shown him the ropes, and because he's a good, obviously Prijovic will be a very good player to learn under. But yeah, no, I really, I've been really happy and really impressed with Bodic. Obviously 2 goals yesterday are going to do a world of good to his confidence as well.
Before I ask you quickly about the Jets, Ben, of the teams, so the teams 6th through 12th, without cheating, Ben, could you tell me who you think has the best goal difference of the teams? So the teams 7th through 12th, the teams out of the finals. Tell me who you think has the best goal difference without cheating.
I'm trying to think. I'm going to say Brisbane Roar.
It is bottom placed Melbourne Victory with -4.
Oh God, this league is a meme.
This league is indeed that. But so on the Jets, it would have been the Jets, but the heavy nature of their loss pushed them down to -6 on the season. The Jets, man, we were getting excited about the Jets. The box office Jets are coming back. Arthur Papas is cooking, and then they lose 3-1 to Western United. It's difficult to figure out this Jets side at the moment, really, isn't it? You can get excited, but then, maybe it's just the institutional weights hanging around their neck, principally the lack of ownership, which felt like we were supposed to hear something about that in January. We didn't. There were rumors about something in February. We didn't. We're about to head into March. There's nothing on the horizon now, but the Jets, is this another team that's sort of found their level this season, do you think?
Yeah, not a good year for the Jets to be bad, given the success of Top Gun Maverick. In an ideal world, they're capitalizing on their right wave. But yeah, no, they've just not been that good. We're all, obviously the loss of Daniel Pena, as has been spoken about on this podcast, has been, bigger to their. Has been I think we underestimated just how much he bought last year, and Renato Piscopo, although he, has those moments of magic, like the goal he scored against Perth Glory at Macedonia Park. It's on the whole, he's been pretty disappointing for me, which is a shame because I really rated him and I thought it was a fantastic pickup by the Jets. Defensively, it's just same old. They had issues. They're still having issues this year. They shipped 3 to Western United, which is never good, as you say. I think it's almost a bit of regression to the mean. Ideally, hope that that Papa stays on another year, because I think he showed enough in that first year as a manager to show that he deserves his chance at A-League level. But yeah, this has been a bit of a they've crashed back to reality this year, and it just hasn't been fun. Last year, they were just so much fun to watch. As everyone has spoken about, they were just a lot of fun to watch, very proactive on the ball, very progressive. And this year, yeah, it feels like a bit of a Murphy's Law season. Maybe last year was an anomaly and this is closer to who they actually are. But that ownership situation, as you say, you need some sort of ownership to have this leadership and set of vision, not just on field and off field as well. And I think that's been a bit telling, about lack of that, off field kind of someone at the steering wheel to point them in the right direction this year.
Yeah, we've gone into that recruiting so much, but it just does keep ringing out. The defense still hasn't been fixed, and yeah, Renato Piscopo is a fine player, but he's a different player than Pena. and some of the other additions like Trent Bahagia and Josh Sotirio bring you certain things. But when you want to be a ball-dominant side, passing teams to death and playing this really possession-based style, how they fit into that, I'm not certain. So that's going to be... But still, they're in the finals mix, and we will see what happens. A question coming in from AAA, AAB again. I'm not going to try to say it properly. Is the Jets asking price too high, or is there simply no interest at all? We can only speculate at this point what it is. I'd have to imagine that whilst the APL aren't going to just give them away for free, bear in mind that it is basically the APL that own the Jets. They're being bankrolled by a consortium of A-League's clubs. Whilst the APL aren't going to give the Jets away, I can't foresee a situation wherein the APL is just happy to have the Jets on their books long term. It's not a good situation for anybody. So I can't see the asking price being too high. It just might be, I would say, no interest at all. But right now, people may be seeing that the A-Leagues would probably like to get the Jets off their books and maybe trying to lowball them. Who knows? We can only speculate on that. As I said, the rumor mill has talked about different owners for ages and nothing's come through. We'll get to the final, and Ben's been very generous of bailing me out, so I'm not doing a massive monologue throughout this entire episode, but we'll get to the final game of the A-League men round that took place on Friday night, took place whilst I was calling Melbourne Knights 1-1 draw with the Oakley Cannons. But from what I can pick up, Ben, going back and watching it, mad ending. So basically the score was 1-0 heading into the 90th minute. The Mariners down a man after Brian Kaltank's red card. Oscar Zavada scores in the 94th minute. Maresh gets red carded in the 97th minute. Now, it wasn't the maddest event of the weekend because Dandenong Thunder and St. Albans drew 4-4, and I think 7 goals in that game, 6 or 7 goals in that game were scored after the 90th minute. But like you were talking about the Mariners as the second best team in the league and the Phoenix in a bit of free fall. Did the Phoenix just get lucky?
Sort of. I mean, like they were playing with the Phoenix were playing with man up for half an hour. But, Central Coast still had opportunities in that stretch. Sam Silvera had a couple of chances, I think. It's obviously, Nick Montgomery was funny after the Glory game a few weeks ago. He was talking about, Brian Kaltak, didn't have a great game against Perth Glory last weekend, but he said, Brian kind of lost a bit of momentum when he got sent off, and he's come back this week, and it's a bit of a slow adjustment. Well, he's just been sent off again, which with I believe Nectar Triantis is away on Young Socceroos duty at the moment as well. So it's obviously good having Dan Hall there, but with Triantis and Kaltak out now, it's going to be a bit of a blow to Central Coast moving forward. But I enjoyed the game. I caught the second half after work, and it was fun. I thought Central Coast maybe could have done a bit more to, probably had perhaps done enough. I thought they would have got away with a win. But credit to Wellington, they toughed it out. They got a result in from an uncomfortable position. Albeit with a man up. I still haven't actually seen the Brian Kaltak's red card because it happened just before I started watching that game. But the Moresh red card was, just a bit of madness. Obviously resulted in Nick Montgomery getting sent from a field as well for his protestations. With Moresh, I know, I think it was Scott Wooten who made, a meal of it, but once you raise your hands to someone's face repeatedly, and I believe he kind of poked him with his finger, in the face, in the eye area. Once you do that, you're giving the referee a decision to make. Now, I know Wooten made the most of it, and a poke just below the eye probably didn't have enough force to push him over, as we saw. But Moresh shouldn't be poking his fingers in that area in the first place. And once the referee sees that, he's going to give a red card. That's just what happens, regardless of whether or not Wooden, played it up, made a meal of it, whatever you like. It's just a boneheaded thing to do from Maresh, and he let his emotions get the better of him. And like I said, I felt in the moment that Central Coast probably had done enough to walk away with all 3 points, but yeah, to lose 2 players and 2 red cards, and then Nick Montgomery as well is it's a blow to them looking forward.
Well, we have, yes, in case any of our eagle-eyed viewers are paying attention, yes, we have gone over 90 minutes. Nick Stoll is gone. I am at the wheel. Brucey bonus special bit of TNC, but we are going to be wrapping up now. And Ben, before you jumped on, we had Taryn on, spoke a bit of dub, spoke a bit of pride round. I know the Perth Glory women's side had the rainbow numbers on the back of their jerseys for their game. Obviously, story Tash Rigby coming out in the week, getting engaged to her partner. Congratulations to her. What did you make of what happened out west with the pride? Did you what was it like?
Well, you'll be very happy to know that when the teams lined up before the game, the Glory Gorilla was had the pride flag in his hands and was waving it. So the Glory Gorilla is an ally. We can confirm that. But yeah, no, I think it was good for the playing kits with the numbers and the socks. I thought were really well done. It was kind of rather than designing a whole new kit, it was just kind of a nice way to freshen it up. And yeah, there are pride flags around. The corner flags of pride, which I think was commonplace throughout the round. And then there were posters up as well talking, promoting Macedonia Park as a safe and inclusive space, which is a nice touch. I noticed there was similar posters around Melbourne Victory. I saw on social media today. I think the club did a good job of it with the women's team for sure. They spoke about, because it was their home game, they wanted to go all out. They wanted for women to be front and center, and obviously given Tash's marriage proposal with Ange Stannett, who was a former Glory player but now plays for Fremantle Dockers in the AFLW, Sharon Rule. It's a really good story. I spoke to Tash about it earlier in the week. Laughed about what good timing it was, and she's been very big this week. She's a fantastic captain for that team because she's she's just a fun person to speak to because Sorry, but the seagulls behind you are starting to look very Hitchcocky and birds. But yeah, yes. But yeah, going back to Tash, she's a fantastic leader for that team. She's such a bubbly, infectious personality. And she was saying, this game is not about enforcing an ideology on people. It's about providing those, people with a safe space because, as the statistics show, people from an LGBTIQ plus, from that demographic, they're not typically sports fans in the way that the rest of the population are, and they don't feel comfortable attending sports games. So, things like the Pride Round, and credit to the actual A-Leagues as well, who reportedly have done a lot of good work in actually setting this up and implementing training sessions and for staff and players on awareness around these sorts of issues. I think. The Glory women, they took a big picture afterwards with the crowd. There were a lot of people there dressed up in, pride colours. Matthew Stacey won best dressed with if you've ever been to a Glory game, Matthew Stacey dresses up every single game. And he won. He went all out for Pride Week, which was, good to see. It was a really nice, there were good vibes down at Macedonia Park. And it was, good to see Glory get their 4th win in a row in the A-League women.
Well, that was the other question. A Hannah Lowry double lifting them to a 2-0 win over Brisbane. And all of a sudden, the finals race, what was pointed out by Teo and Dubzone today, they can't because I think they play each other during the run home. But in theory, in some magical world, if Victory, Canberra and Perth Glory were all to win out throughout the rest of the season, Perth Glory would finish on the most points. So I said earlier on the show when we had Taryn on, that if anybody was going to overhaul Melbourne Victory, I thought it would be Perth Glory. What do you think the odds are actually that Alex Epakis and co can overhaul Melbourne Victory and Canberra United into the finals? They've got Western Sydney for their next game, and then I think they've got to play Adelaide as well, and then there's a game against Wellington. But I think you have pointed out on the show, then there is a murderous run home, isn't there?
There is. Their final 3 games of a season are 6 days apart, and they're all in 3 different states, which is going to be, I'm sure Alex Epakis is hoping that they are, well and truly in the race, or well and truly in the top 4 by the time they actually reach that, those final 3 games, so that they don't have to win them all to, secure their spot. But yeah, he's spoken for a while about how every game needs to be, treated like the last game of the season. He's spoken about it repeatedly about, every game needs intensity. Every game needs, a certain, understanding that we need 3 points here. And, he was very quick to pay tribute to the players for heeding his advice and talking about how important, he says they've just taken to the game plans like ducks to water, basically. And, he basically put all all the improvement on them. He said they're doing exactly, as I asked them to, and, they're reaping the rewards at the moment. It's really good, like I've spoken about previously. Obviously, Riley Baisden was top scorer in the league when she did her ACL, and it's a huge loss to his team. But you've had players like Susan Fonsong-Cam step up. Sophia Sakalis, I thought, was great yesterday. Hit the bar twice, and was really just so lethal cutting in. She looked very dangerous. Someone like a Hannah Lowry, who's been the reason I haven't really missed Ella Mastrantonio. It's really nice to see a 19-year-old like Lowry just so comfortable on the ball. She shows for the ball. She wants the ball like in tight areas. She's such a, as Parker said in the post-game presser yesterday, that, yes, with the first goal, Shuttlesworth has slipped and kicked it straight to her, but, Lowry still had to compose herself and, just guide that ball over Shuttleworth's head and into the back of the net. A lot of players would have messed that up. And for a 19-year-old to show just such poise and coolness on the ball is a really exciting thing. And she's definitely someone I think can make that jump to Matildas long term.
Well, it will be an interesting run home throughout the rest of the A-League women's season. Well, the rain has started to fall here at Amy Park. It is 10:15 on the East Coast. The A-League women's game here finished 2 hours ago. I think I'm the last person in the stadium. I think it's probably about time that we begin to wrap up here at the National Curriculum for this latest edition on the 26th of February, or whenever you happen to be listening to it on a podcast. We had Nick Stoll at the start of the show. Great to have Taryn Heddo to join us to speak about Pride and A-League Women's. Ben Smith has come in and absolutely bailed me out to take us through the rest of the week's action. Ben, thank you ever so much for joining us.
Thank you, Joe. You should have just done a Zach Lowe style monologue to end the show. It would have been brilliant.
I've got to let you say something. Anyway, but yes, thank you ever so much for joining us on the National Curriculum. For anybody watching along in the stream, my T-shirt is from Transcend, Protect Trans Kids. My button is from Transgender Victoria. Remember, trans rights are human rights. But anyways, wherever you are around the world, thank you ever so much for listening. And as I tee up the outro music, and I will remind you, I can't find the brand. This is awful. I forgot to get that. As I tee up the exit music, I will say thanks and success.